Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about Western civilization. It's obviously in decline. I don't think there's any dispute there from any corner. But is the decline terminal? Is this we're just watching the end game as it unfolds and falls into the abyss, or can this be recovered? Is it not too late? What are the signs of civilization in terminal decline, and are all the signs there in the West that decline is taking place and that it's now irrevocable, that decline will occur? Well, let's sort of have a look at that. A lot of people look throughout history at various empires that have risen and fallen. The Persian Empire has had probably three periods when it was sort of in the sun. Most of those, or two of them, were in the BC period, and one sort of around the 1400s. The Persian Empire was doing pretty good there, alongside the Ottoman Empire, really. And if you look at Persia today, Iran, there's no reason why I suppose that it couldn't become maybe a major player in the region, but it's hard to perceive that it could be the once great empire stretching from northern India right through to the western coast of Turkey. That looks very unlikely today, but or even the possibility of in the future. But they've been surprises, I guess, in the past. But a number of empires have come and gone, and then revitalized themselves, found new energy, and risen again. The second sort of coming, if you like, it never seems to be quite as vigorous as the first, and the third one again less vigorous, if indeed there are that many. When we look at sort of great empires, we need to look at Rome was once the center of the Mediterranean, and then without rivals. It was a massive population trading enterprise, huge majestic buildings, and with a population of over 1 million people. And yet a few hundred years after its zenith in terms of population, it was a wasteland of 30,000, a population believed to be only 30,000. That's from 1 million down to 30,000. And the great Roman Senate and all the great buildings had stray cats and were being used by goat herders to keep their goats in, and that sort of thing. That's the fall from grace, the magnitude of the fall from grace that's happened. And even if you look at Britain, you go to London, to think that just over 120 years ago, Britain was considered the world's supreme power, and there were these great parades of homage to the British state and the monarch, Queen Victoria at the time, and such was the power of the British state then. But look at it now. I mean, goodness me, they're so useless and hopeless today. They can't even stop a bunch of third world peasants arriving in dinghies. They're that useless. So they're a shadow of what they used to be. The once vaunted parliament that was the envy of the world, and now has people like Diane Abbott in it, and black lesbians, and they can't wait to debase it and degrade it some more with how many transgender bathrooms they can push in there. It's very sad to see such greatness engage in such extensive and quite determined self-destruction. And the power of Britain in the area around Bosnia and Serbia and Croatia. There were the Muslims were giving the Christians a hard time I think it was the 1880s, late 1870s, early 1880s, and the Christian British government was quite concerned about this, so they sent the British Mediterranean fleet to cruise past the coast near what would be Albania and all that up there around that, and to engage in exercise, fire a few cannons off into the air and into the ocean, and just do a demonstration. And the technology that the British had at the time was far in front of really almost anyone else, and so the Muslims were persecuting the Christians, got the message pretty quickly, and the job was done. It only required that the British fleet cruised off the coast of that's all. So such was the view. But and look at it now. I mean, goodness me, well, what a difference. So civilizations and nation states can come and go, but Western civilization in totality, Western Europe, United States, Australia, Canada, that sort of thing. The Western civilization is under attack. It's the only civilization that's under attack, and the attack is relentless, and it's from people inside. So it's not from outside that the civilization is being attacked. It's people from inside. And if you look at, say, the Biden administration, and even Boris Johnson and his alleged conservatives, of course, both of them controlled by the globalists, by the way, but they believe that the biggest threat to Britain and the United States is these white supremacists. Now what they've done, or if a white person even spits on a sidewalk, there you go, white supremacy, Hitler, Nazi, fascist. It's that silly, and it's that absurd, it's that childish, it's that fucking infantile. But that's so. Whenever a civilization looks at the enemy, the enemies that it has, or limitations to its success, limitations to its achievements and to its economy. Once it looks at the enemies it has all within and unseen, then it's something that's never going to last very long. No civilization can survive like that. This was a problem with the communists of the Soviet Union, and they believed that not that they didn't have enemies abroad. They did believe that. But they believed that the enemies that would sort of strike the final fatal blow were from within. So they were always scurrying around looking for these imagined enemies, but they just couldn't find them. So they had to invent these things. If someone took a book about Shakespeare out of the library, that's it. They're a counter-revolutionary enemy of the people, fascists. And so they had these absurd criteria. And we're seeing this in the West now, that any attempt to stop a rioter burning down a building is an act of white supremacy. And that's how absurd it's got in the West now. But this is one of the key components and key requirements, if you like, and key indicators to civilizational decline. And there's a number of ones, and they're moral, they're intellectual, they're spiritual. So let's just go through a few of them. There's the one about these imagined enemies within that causes sort of internal distrust. And if you look at the decline in social trust that's occurred in the West since even the last, 10, 12 years, it's astonishing, incredible the amount of trust that's been lost. Now, some of that's been globalist policies, let's get Whitey, let's crash Whitey, white supremacists, fascists, everywhere. So there's that, because they've got to get Whitey out the way if they want to impose the globalist project. But it's also importing mass migration. It's also bringing people into the country who come from, into the West rather, who come from very low trust, zero trust societies where you only trust your direct blood relatives and no one else. And so, whereas we in the West, how previously at least, had relatively high trust. In doing business, whenever I was doing business, I just automatically assumed the other person was well-intentioned and was not wicked, evil, or treacherous, or was going to screw me or something like that. It didn't enter my mind. If they behaved in a way that suggested I should think otherwise, sure, then my thinking would change. But it had to be quite clear. Otherwise, I just assumed everyone's intention was good. I suppose there's limitations to that. If you're in a dark alley at night and someone's coming towards you, you may not think their intentions are good, but generally socially and in business, just assume that intentions were good. That's changed now. People don't assume that anymore, certainly not to the extent. In business, trust has really declined and diminished. And there are two reasons for that, though. One is it's just diminished because, again, all these third world people coming in who only understand corruption and things like that. That doesn't help. But also the sort of people that are being promoted into senior roles in business are very underqualified. They're miles out of their depth. So they tend to be very insecure. When people are that insecure and unsure of themselves, it comes across as that they can't afford to trust anybody because they just simply don't know what they're doing. They're so terrified they'll fuck everything up that they don't, they're unable to trust people given that the risk, as they would see it, of doing that. So social trust diminishing is very big. Now, if you look at, say, Asian societies, not necessarily Japan, but if you look at Asian societies, China and all across Asia, really. Again, not so much maybe South Korea, but the lack of trust that they have, they only really trust family members or people they've known since primary school. You have to the trust outside of people directly. Even in places like Hong Kong that had been British colonies for a long time, that the trust there was far lower than in a Western country, and they would only really trust their own blood relatives, and if they were older people they'd known since primary school, kindergarten, and so on, and if families had intermarried and the like. So, and the same with Eastern Europe and Russia. When the Berlin Wall came down and the Soviet Union fell over, the social trust. They just didn't understand it. They didn't know what social trust was. And people who'd come from Russia, and I have done business with some of them and so on in Australia, and they were years after they'd first arrived, they would say they were shocked at how trustworthy people were. In Russia, we'd never trust people like that. So it's the difference of coming from, and they were quite shocked coming from a low trust society into a high trust society. But that's being lost at a rate of knots, and not helped by Western governments, by the way, who, for example, will suggest that Kyle Rittenhouse was an evil white supremacist. To the media, he shot black people with a machine gun, and making, telling the most outrageous lies. So people don't trust the media, know the media is lying, but don't quite get as to why. Why would they lie? The politicians, the lying, the lying and the deception. No, not the politicians have always lied, but it's now, the most dangerous thing in America is white supremacist. What a fucking lie! What a fucking lie that is. But once they go down that path, and they're going down it, they remove trust from society, or certainly from sections of society, and so it's to no benefit. They think they're being tough and kicking ass and making sure the globalist project is imposed upon a people that don't want it, but they're not the collateral damage, the lack of trust and the disquiet that it's causing the population. That's not a price that they want to pay, and that they're only going to be able to control it through yet more threats and more accusations and more propaganda and so on. Also, the use of various organs of not only the state but the economy to go after so-called white supremacists, like using social media, using the banking system. The banking system, well, we don't like your politics, buddy, so you're not allowed to have a bank account, or you're not allowed to have a credit card, and these sorts of things. I mean, that's insane. But these are the indications of a civilization in decline. Similarly, with education, where it's a merit-based education, everyone's encouraged to do the very best they can, and that the education system supports that, which would naturally gravitate disproportionately to the brighter, higher achieving people. But that's how a merit system is meant to work. It doesn't mean that people who are a little bit slower shouldn't have access to help. They should. And there have been many programs that tried over the years where black people or black students and Hispanic students can get free after school coaching and tuition free. All they've got to do is come along, and it's all later. But they don't turn up. Now, what do? Do you do you demand they go and there's some sort of a threat? I don't know if that would work either. But that's all gone. The Merit Society has been a society based on merit and hard work and personal responsibility and trying to improve oneself and trying to have social mobility and that sort of thing. That's disappearing and has all but gone, actually. There's very, very little of that left. Now, on the spiritual side, I think any consumer society tends to maybe have less involvement in spirituality, religion, and that sort of thing, and that's definitely happened. But the unrelenting attack on the Catholic Church, and they haven't done themselves any favours, by the way, in some of the behaviour, but the unrelenting attack on, well, not just the Catholic Church, Christianity generally. There are some subsets of the church who spend more time talking about gay, lesbian issues than they do about God or Jesus. That's insane. So spirituality is going. So all the factors that bind a civilization, a population together, whether it be language or any of those sorts of things, they're disappearing. Now, multiculturalism is probably the biggest dagger to the heart of Western society, where masses, not just a few here and there, but masses of people are coming in. Hindus, Muslims, and so on, and they're being told, if not encouraged, to maintain their own culture, and so it automatically creates a balkanization of the host society, and these people aren't required to integrate or assimilate, and they're encouraged to have their own community separate from the white people or from other communities for that matter, and they're told to or encouraged and funded by taxpayer money to demand resources from the central sort of pot from the cake, that to demand resources specifically just for their community. We want our own politicians. We want our own infrastructure. We want this. We want that. We want our shops in this or that language and so on. And not only are they being supported and encouraged and accommodated, and the white taxpayer dollars are being thrown at them to help it all along. So this is not something that's going to end in social unity and communities coming together. Far from it. So this is the divide. So it's the society as a total is dividing, and the standards are falling. Spirituality is disappearing. Not so much with the Muslims that are coming into the West. They want to maintain their Islamic spirituality and fine, and that's the binding agent for them. But it makes them even less likely to integrate. So I think all the markers are there, all the things are there to cause the collapse of Western civilization. Now, the globalists aren't trying to make Chinese civilization collapse or Japanese civilization, or they're not trying to make the Islamic, well, they are giving the Islamic civilization, sort of putting it under various pressures, but not the sort of pressures that will create the type of outcome that the globalists seem to be pursuing. For example, as soon as they invade Iraq, one of the very first things they do is to reconnect the water supply or get the electricity running or make sure there's food being done. No. It's to open up a gay lesbian counselling service in downtown Baghdad. That's their first priority. That's the priority to deal with. So that gives away the mindset of the globalists. How can we divide and fuck up this society? I know. Let's have a gay lesbian class. Let's have a gender studies class. Let's do that, and so on. And you saw that same playbook in Afghanistan. They weren't doing it because they gave a shit about women. Far from it. They did it because they thought it'd be destructive to the Afghan society. But the Islamic faith is so too strong. It's far too strong and it doesn't work there. The Christians have been corrupted with, firstly, a belief in Christian institutions. That's why the globalists went into the institutions because we trusted them, we believed in them. By the time we woke up and realised that that they'd been infiltrated by globalists and our own institutions being used against us. By the time we understood that, it was kind of too late. So now, if we look at Western civilization in isolation, it's really had various sort of renaissance, if you like. If we look at, say, there was an all-powerful Spain in the 1500s. Then by the late 1600s, there was an all-powerful France. Then by the mid-1700s, there's an all-powerful Britain. And then in the 1900s, there was the United States. So the baton is sort of being passed around. I don't think there's another Western white society to pass the baton to. So I don't know if there's going to be any developments. I would think not. Now, the other thing that the Western civilization separated from was technologically, because of the Enlightenment and because of the capacity of Western civilization to deal directly with reality rather than fantasy, then it was able to achieve technical things that no other society could. But this has changed, and most societies now are in the China, as an example, are in the throes of catching up technologically. So that technological separation isn't there. There is no uniqueness in the West in a technological sense anymore, particularly with lowering standards of education and so on. The West is inevitably going to lead it. We're going to lose its technological lead. So, but because capitalism stops, has an inbuilt, although we're losing that too, capitalism has an inbuilt capacity to reinvent itself because it shrinks back from waste, from wasting things, and then moves resources into an area that's more productive. Now, the modern capitalism practiced by Britain and then the United States is new, and that I think puts a different framework on things. Right now, the United States and the Western world generally is moving towards a medieval system of monopolies and big companies being effectively appointed as tax collectors and being given a nice piece of the action as a result. So we don't. It's hard to know whether capitalism will be able to reinvent itself given that straitjacket it's currently in, but put in there by the globalists, by the way. But I think it's got the capacity to shake off that straitjacket and actually come back. So I wouldn't write Western civilization off, but I don't think we've got that long. I mean, climate change, everything's all bullshit, but I think we've got that long. There'll be I think China will implode of its own. It'll collapse under its own weight, given not too much longer. But the West really needs to accept that or understand that it's engaging in wholesale self-destruction, and it's done by the elites. And no matter what destruction is caused, they're going to have plenty of goodies on their table in their gated communities. It's just the rest of us that'll suffer. And I was talking to an Indian businessman just recently, and his view is rather communist. He said, "Well, the white countries really had all the wealth for over 200 years, and that's wrong. It shouldn't be allowed." He didn't say why, but that they were the most productive and the most conscientious and the highest achieving and the most innovative and those sort of things. Organisationally, the most the best put together. No, that it was just wrong according to him. So he wants all the wealth in the world to be redistributed so it's even, so everyone's got an even amount. It's very communist, and he thinks that's going to be the solution to things. But that all, to me, demonstrates that India isn't really going to go anywhere, not with that sort of fucking attitude. And I think it's an attitude that's widely held in India. So, that's my take on things. You've been fantastic today, and thank you for listening.